Hi, welcome. Today I'm going to be talking about a little bit less technical topic about quality communication at this quality engineering talk. My name is Patrick. I'm a freelance IT consultant and software developer. And in my career, I've seen features and projects be implemented slower with more bugs or misunderstood features than I think is necessary. And I think the root cause of that is poor communication. So I think with better communication, we can spend less time in meetings and actually get stuff done better. Before I start, please do interrupt me. This is a talk about communication, so if you have a question, if I didn't make anything quite clear enough, let me know and we'll talk. One more. On this QR code, you'll find the slides if you want to follow along. It'll be up in the corner the entire time. What are we going to talk about? I'll talk about why we're talking about this topic. And then also a little bit more technical stuff, some sort of theory, communication theory a little bit, and then practice and advice. And I'll summarize everything. So why? Why are we talking about this? With better communication, we can avoid misunderstandings, frustrations, features that are bugs. What do I mean by that? It means that a developer in the end develops something thinking it's the feature, but it turns out to not be what the users actually want. It's kind of I've read this term today from Anupam actually, idea bug. So someone misunderstood something and built something, but it's actually a bug. We'll talk about propagation of miscommunication, how miscommunication in one spot propagates through a chain. And all of this costs money. People leave companies due to frustrations, due to bad communication. And fixing bugs later than possible is more expensive. I don't know if you're familiar with the Booms curve, but this is what it looks like. If we find a bug in the requirements first, it's really cheap to fix because it's before we implement anything. And the next stage, if we're finding a bug in testing, we've implemented a little bit, but we find the bug before we actually deploy it to the production. But once it's in production, and let's say it's a bug in the database tables, and database tables get filled with data by the users, and now we want to fix that. It's really expensive to fix that because now we have to migrate the data, make sure there's no downtime. That just gets more expensive. Okay, but can we frame this a little bit more positively? With good communication, we're cost effective. We just went over this. It's easier and cheaper to build stuff right from the start than fixing bugs later. It helps you get your point across. And I can convince people if I communicate better. And it leads to better and quicker team alignment. And in the end, it just helps getting shit done fast together. Why should I care personally? To be honest, engineers don't have the best reputation regarding communication skills. So if you're already better at that, you already stand out. And if you can communicate your value better to your managers, you can negotiate better salaries, for example. And in the end, it leads to more opportunities, more influence, and more money, more freedom. You can trade money against freedom. If you want to work less for more money, you get more freedom. All right, with that out of the way, let's talk a bit about technical stuff. I found this speech chain, and it's really interesting, and I just want to read this quote to you. The speech chain is a simple model of spoken communication that highlights the transformation of an intention in the mind of the speaker to an understanding of that intention in the mind of the listener through processes that involve the grammatical code, the phonological code, articulation, sound, hearing, and perception. So what this means is I'm a speaker here, and I have thoughts in my head, and thoughts are a really abstract thing. And to communicate that to someone else, the listener or perceiver in this case, I have to formulate that thought in my head into language and then speak that language essentially. And there's a feedback loop, or actually two feedback loops. First, after I talk, I hear my own voice. I hear how loud I am. If I'm too quiet, I need to speak up. If I'm too loud, maybe I'll quiet down a little bit. There's also haptic feedback. I can feel my mouth move, but also my body. Maybe I'm nervous, maybe I'm shaking. I feel all that. Now, if we move over to the perceiver hears my sound waves in their ear. That creates language again, and from that, again, meaning. So what we're trying to do here is that the thought in the speaker matches what the perceiver in the end understands. To sum it up, to get your point across effectively, you need to take care of the volume of your voice. Also, body language is important, your posture, your energy. It's easier to follow someone when their energy is right. If they're shy or there's no energy, it's hard to follow them, what they're saying. Also, articulation and intonation. The way I put emphasis on my words, it makes it easier for you guys in this case to listen to me. Also, an accent. If I have a strong accent, it might be hard to understand me. Maybe it takes a second longer to understand what word I was saying. This is all, it's a factor. Now, in remote cases, I think at least ever since the pandemic, it's been more common that people work remotely, especially in our sector. As a speaker, you should have a good microphone. It helps people understand you. If you want to be a good listener, you should have good speakers. Maybe you have noise-canceling headphones. That helps in the conversation as a whole. Also, you want to have a good camera and good lighting. This goes for both speaker and listener. As a speaker, it helps the listeners if they can read my lips. That helps in understanding. But also, as a speaker, I want to see how listeners view me. Maybe I can see in their facial expression that they didn't understand what I said, so I can repeat it or ask them, hey, do I need to clarify something? Okay, if we move on from this more verbal-based communication, or the model that we just talked about, the speech chain, to a more abstract way, there's the source message channel receiver model. In this case, the source is the speaker, or was the speaker in the previous model, and the receiver is the same. But the message and the channel can be anything now. It's not just verbal. It can be seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, tasting, anything. So this is more abstract than just the verbal communication. It can be an audio or video recording, a diagram, an image, or even art or braille. That's an example for the touching part. If we boil that down to a graphic, this is how I would represent it. You have the center on one side, and they're trying to transmit data, if we want to be technical about it, and they transmit that data through a channel, and the channel might be noisy, so there's going to be some data loss, inevitably. And at the end, there is understanding on the receiver side, which we can mathematically express as data minus data loss. Now, you might be familiar with the telephone game, or Stille Post in German, where you speak to more people, or you send one message to one person and you propagate that through. If we assume a data loss on each communication point, or I call it hop later, of 10%, and there's only 5 people involved, meaning there's 4 hops of communication, the developer at the end of this chain, from end user to client buyer to support to product manager, finally to developer, the developer only understands about 66%. Now this gets even worse if we're talking about 10 hops. And I actually found this chain in a LinkedIn post. I don't know if it was exaggerated or real, but in this case, the developer at the end would understand only 35% of what the user actually wants.
That's the best case.
But that's the best case because you're assuming that data minus data loss only. But if you switch 3 slides back, one more, the receiver's attitudes, knowledge, and context is different than the source. So
Correct.
then the data loss is even more because it's not purely just about data, it's about how they really translate your message to their understanding.
Good point, good point. What I mean by this in this part, very good point. This part here and the brain, this is all part of the channel, so to speak. So if we all boil that down into the data loss to just one number, it's included in that. But it's correct. It's part of the communication channel. Okay, so what can we do about this? There's two steps or two options we can do. First one would be reduce the number of hops. This is sort of obvious, because then we don't have that propagation problem. But that's not always practically possible. So a second solution would be to reduce the data loss at every single hop. That way, the curve is flattened, and I'll come to that. So for the first solution, just cut the middle people. It sounds drastic, and I don't mean to say that those roles don't have their place, but I'm just saying in more situations, developers should be in the same meetings with the end users. And just that leads to having more people in meetings. The second option would be to reduce the data loss. So in this case, I have two curves. One curve is for 10% data loss, that's the red curve, and 5% data loss for the green curve. And you can already see that after 10 hops, instead of 35% data retention in this case, we would be at 60% data retention, so only 40% data loss compared to 65. And then you can see that for more hops on the right side. Now, how do we actually define good communication? The way I would define it is getting your point across with little to no data loss, meaning few misunderstandings, little to no back and forth, little to no rework. And this also leads to less frustration. Okay, now to the practical section. First, I want to talk about the written async communication. These are some examples, so email, Slack messages, text messages, anything that's in written form, Confluence pages, pull request descriptions, commit messages, anything you write down, basically. Why is this a challenge? It's challenging because there's fewer sensory input channels that we perceive this message through. There's no intonation, there's no body language, no energy, and it's super easy to misinterpret what people say. They can, if it's, in a code review, for example, people might assume that their tone is very angry, but it's actually not what the sender meant. It's just cold, hard facts, and there's lots of ways to interpret and misinterpret things. Also, there's slow feedback for clarification. In a verbal face-to-face communication, it's really easy for the receiver to ask questions and ask for clarifications. So when I write messages, text messages, I try to provide all the necessary context, so there's little to no back and forth necessary. So prefer too much context over too little. I want to talk a little bit about GitLab. GitLab is a great resource because it's a remote first or even all remote company, and they have mastered async communication. They put out basically everything open source. They have a handbook about communication, and I can highly recommend reading up on that. One thing I want to quote from them, at GitLab, we communicate assuming others have low context. We provide as much context as possible to avoid confusion. This is basically what I just said. Prefer more context over too little. Yes, underpin.
And I can vouch for GitLab documentation being excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We've all had this experience.
That's actually their example of the documentation is how to write documentation.
Yeah.
So if you're ever in a situation, go to GitLab. They'll probably have an answer for you. I want to share some of their tips. They have a section about better writing. One tip is use short sentences. Fewer than 15 words is what they're shooting for. And they actually recommend this HemingwayApp.com. And there you can copy and paste or write whatever you're writing, and it'll highlight things that are too complicated, where there's other words that you can use. It's really helpful if you want to improve your writing. Also, replace common phrases like due to the fact. Just use because. It's simpler, gets the same message across. Just use the simple word. Also, avoid ambiguous words. Instead of saying nearly, just say the exact percentage, for example. Also, cut acronyms and jargon. You've probably all heard the term, explain it to me like I'm 5. Obviously, you shouldn't be condescending, but don't assume that people know what certain acronyms like MR and PR stand for. We, in this room, I assume, all know that this means merge request or pull request, but if there's ever a chance that some non-technical person or less technical person will read your message, just write it out. It's easier. Also, use the so what test. Does your content provide value? Will your audience understand? Are you sharing enough context? What's your conclusion? Don't just spam someone with data. Say what you conclude from that data instead of leaving that open. OK, on to code reviews. We touched on that a little bit already. Another quote from GitLab. Code reviews are methodical assessments of code designed to identify bugs, increase code quality, and help developers learn the source code. In short, we want to find defects and prevent bugs. We use this also to knowledge share, so people know the code base, not just the person that wrote it. We want to use it to enforce and improve code base quality and standards and enhance security. The problem with all these points, except maybe for knowledge sharing, is those are inherently negative. So if I'm in a code review, I need to point out stuff someone did wrong. And that's not easy to do without offending or discouraging the contributor. So some don'ts before I go to the do's. I try to avoid telling, commanding, or demanding something from someone. I try to avoid making something personal. I try to avoid saying you explicitly, unless I'm praising someone. And don't be absolute. You could be wrong. For the do's, ask clarifying questions. Maybe you misunderstood something. What I would say is, I don't know what this does. I don't understand this. Can you please explain it to me? I would ask questions, as I just said, I don't understand this, but also something like, can we do it this or that way? It's more inclusive rather than pointing fingers at someone. And consider that you could be wrong. You or I may have missed something, and instead of accusing someone, just ask. Also, assume the best intentions. I've never met any developer anywhere that intentionally wants to mess up the code base. And if they do, you have bigger problems, I think. And also, praise and make compliments. It's so easy in code reviews to just focus on the bad stuff. But if you see something that you genuinely like, an implementation that you wouldn't have come up with, just say it. Say, hey, this is great. I'm going to try doing this way myself. And also treat others as you would like them to treat you. OK. I need to drink something. Sorry. I want to talk about ambiguities. Yes?
Just one point in your previous slide. Do you expect the code reviewers to check the potential bugs? Or do you mean like just examine the test cases and then letting the good test cases to catch bugs?
Well, test cases are only going to catch bugs if the tests are already implemented for that, right?
Yes.
But
are you
obviously,
going to manually review, OK, this logic is not correct, instead of asking unit tests to check that?
I mean, the way I would do code reviews is I mostly look at tests, to be honest. And if I see that there's an edge case missing, I'll say, hey, write a test for that. And then if it fails, the developer is going to know, OK, I need to address this. But yeah, to find defects, I would look at the tests first to see if whatever I'm thinking of is actually covered in tests.
There's a very interesting psychological thing we have humans, is that when we see negative corrective feedback from a machine, we're like, okay, fine, I'm fixing it. When we see the same feedback from a person, we're like, what the hell? How dare you? So this is very smart. Ask the person to write the test. The test fails, the person sees, oh, I forgot.
Yeah, yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
OK.
Thank you.
All right, so what I want to talk about is establishing the same language. This is just an example, but ask yourself, what does the term service mean in your context? It may be a microservice that can be deployed. It could be just a module or a class in code. Do the customers have the same understanding of the same term? So is there a translation happening between terms inside the development team and outside the company, customer facing? You just need to define that within your team, so when you say a certain term, everybody understands what that means. Okay, since we're a room full of QAs, I have a question for all of you. How would you test these two statements? If event starts before midnight, then do A. If event starts after midnight, then do B.
Every event starts before and after midnight.
Very good point. So Adam said, what if the event starts before and after midnight?
Like, I mean, like every event.
Yeah, every event. Yes,
starts
exactly. Sorry. Yes.
Before and after, right?
So kind of boundary value analysis, there is something called boundary. So midnight, if it's a boundary like it's 12 o'clock, it's midnight for an example. Like we can test something like 11.59 and then something exactly at 12 and something after 12. So this are the edge scenario like which we need to have like a priority. So after that we can have something before and as a positive and after as a negative for the A1.
Yes, perfect. 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 Anything else?
Would you maybe re-summarize the answers? Because
yeah, sorry. So Adam said that every event basically starts before and after midnight.
So right now we are before midnight and we are after midnight already.
Yes. And then, sorry, what's your name?
Sugumar.
Subamar?
Yeah, Sugumar.
Sugamar. Said that we need to test right at midnight, right? We need to test the edges right before midnight, right after midnight, but also right at midnight. And then someone said, what about time zones? Okay?
What is midnight?
Yeah, exactly. What is midnight where? I love this audience. You'll see the next slide.
So 12 p.m.?
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially the same problem. Noon, what's noon? Is it 12 right on the dot? What's PM, what's AM, right? Is that your question?
Yeah, so it's 12 hours after midnight, 12 hours before midnight.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
But so this is basically an example that the requirements are the problem, right? Because
Exactly.
it's unspecified.
Yes. So, you mentioned all the points that I wanted to get to. What happens when an event starts exactly at midnight? This is not defined, so the requirements are shit. And as Adam said, don't all events technically start before and after midnight? And then also, which time zone? Midnight where? Perfect. So as a developer...
You didn't even need this slide, right?
Yeah, I didn't even need it, but since you all said it, but it's great. Okay. Another thing about acronyms. There's a, I think, rather famous email by Elon Musk with the subject line, yeah, I know, sorry. But I actually agree with him on that one. As acronyms seriously suck. Optimize for the reader and not the writer. I know it's easy to write your common acronyms, but if someone... Excuse me?
Child's name is kind of an acronym or what is it?
Excuse me?
One of his child's name is...
Oh, X? Or is that? Yeah. But yeah, if you write acronyms and the reader needs to stop and think or even pull out Google to see what it is, it hinders communication. It stops the person from reading to continue reading. And this goes especially for people that don't know acronyms, for newcomers, especially when you're onboarding people. If you just have to provide them with a huge list of acronyms that they have to learn so they can get started in the company, that's not a good sign.
Usually then I say that we use too many TLAs.
Too many
TLAs.
What is that? Another acronym?
Three-letter acronym.
Oh, yeah. So Adam said they use, or he says we use too many TLAs, three-letter acronyms.
Basically, in fintech companies, there will be many acronyms. They can't do things without acronyms. Like ETF, EFT, blah blah, many things are there.
Yeah, but it's hard if you need to read all of those. Yes.
If I can add a quick comment, one community that really needs this advice is the Debian community. Like they have many more acronyms than everyone else. Like request for help, request for packaging, they do that all day long.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I think this picture ignores a bit the reality of why people fall into using acronyms so much. Let's imagine that whenever we would speak of SSL and TLS, we would say transport layer security all the time. We would just go nuts.
But it depends on whom you talk to, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're writing an article for junior developers, you will be explaining what this acronym means. But if you talk to me, you can say TLS, of course I'll understand you, right? So it depends on the audience, exactly what you're saying.
Okay.
I'll get to that. Good point. I'll get to that. Within your audience, you may want to use it, of course, but I'm saying in general, I would try to reduce the number of acronyms you use.
Or use vocabulary for that.
What do you say?
Or use vocabulary for that.
Yeah, you can
to have a separate one.
Oh, yeah.
You can even set it in a document. That's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
good question, the good answer for you.
Or
Yeah.
some slide on our document. Like
But even in research papers, you have, this is like three-letter acronym, three-letter acronym, this means this, and it's all used all the time within the research paper.
Yeah, I've written documentation before where there was a diagram where there was three-letter acronyms all over the place, all very similar. There was at the beginning something that explained everything, but I read something, I looked at the diagram, I was like, what does this mean? Scroll up, scroll down. What was the old one again? Scroll up, scroll down. You just keep forgetting. But yeah, obviously it's okay in certain cases to use acronyms. I would say in this day and age, pretty much everyone, not just technical people, understand what AI means. It's artificial intelligence. Everybody knows that. It's in everybody's mouths. And because of that, maybe it's probably going to be fewer people know what LLM means. And then we're moving on to expert level, sort of. Fewer people will understand what API means. Even fewer people will understand REST APIs, for example, just as an example. So if you know which audience you're talking to, if you're talking to backend developers in general, you can use those acronyms, of course. But if there is a chance that less technical people can read whatever you're writing, write it out.
Sorry, I have a comment. What is LLC? I don't know what LLM.
Oh, perfect. Awesome.
API, but I have no idea what is it.
LLM is large language models.
Okay.
It's-
Like master of Legnum, right?
Okay,
Like
this is
lawyers.
cool.
Yeah.
It's like LLM. Before it was like the master of law.
Yeah, I mean, this is a perfect example. There's one LLM, different meanings. Yes.
I have maybe a question to the previous slide. So about the basically ambiguous statement. Sorry, maybe one more about maybe kind of system requirements.
Wait, what are we talking about? Back?
Like before and after midnight. Thing.
Oh, yeah.
So this directly affect the quality, right? Because it may compromise our testing cases or the system logic and compromise the qualities. And but this is also that's like the precise definitions according to like system terminology, right? So maybe for others it doesn't matter. So do you think that system developers or testing engineers should be really aware of these statement and then give feedback if like that statement is inaccurate, or this is basically like the people in the business line or like project managers tasked to clearly define and check if the statements are correct or accurate?
Yeah, this was an example of poor requirements, actually.
Yeah.
This is about ambiguities. So things are uncertain. You don't know what this actually means. As it was pointed out, all events start before and after midnight. So what are we talking about? We need to define intervals.
Yeah, I got it, but the people who make the first requirements are the people who are not so familiar with systemic terminology or systemic accuracy, right? So we cannot actually ask for such like accuracies. Like for them, it doesn't matter. Like midnight is midnight, and they
Yeah, but then you need to ask them what they actually mean. Where are the thresholds between before and after midnight, for example? Should we just make a cut at noon, or is there some other time frame that we want to look at?
In your expectation, developers ask the project managers or
Yeah,
project managers?
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, ideally, they define it better, but of course, the developers that need to implement it, they need to ask and clarify before they continue.
Yeah, I was just wondering how we can like sustainably improve such qualities, because we cannot guarantee that developers, testers like spot these inaccuracies and then report it back to the business project managers. So it's like wondering how we can make sure that quality.
I think it's a cultural question. Let's discuss culture later.
Yeah. I mean, this is company culture essentially. Okay, another example. Who wants to guess what CI stands for? Anything else?
Corporate identity.
Cheerful intonation.
For example?
Cloud integration. CLAR.
Perfect.
Context.
Huh?
Depends on the context.
Perfect answer. So I just found a few examples. Obviously, in this room, everybody says continuous integration, but also corporate identity, confidential informant in law, customer intelligence, counterintelligence. As you said, it depends on the context. So this goes to say it can be confusing. Maybe you've seen this one floating around. It's kind of funny. So mom doesn't know what LOL stands for. It's not lots of love. So it can get funny or sad. All right. In summary, prefer being too exact over being too vague and ambiguous. Define context-specific language, the meaning of terms. Avoid jargon, avoid acronyms. Obviously, if you know your audience, it can be fine, but try to avoid it as a rule of thumb. And optimize for reader speed of understanding, not writer's typing speed. And again, when in doubt, write it out. I want to talk about one sort of scenario that I have in mind. Imagine someone is presenting a new feature, like a product owner, and at the end they ask you, do you know what I mean? And I think this is a bit problematic because the undertone is kind of manipulative. It says a good developer understands this. It's obvious. And imagine you're in a meeting with more people. People don't tend to say yes because they don't want to seem stupid. So they just say no, not along, and move on. And maybe when they start implementing stuff and questions come up, then they will ask. But there's another problem. When people just say yes, the PO cannot be sure that people actually understand. So a better way to ask a question is, can you explain this in your own words? This forces people to explain rather than giving a binary yes or no answer. And it allows the PO to verify if people actually understand. And also have the guts to say no. You're probably not alone.
Like how? How would be better?
What do you mean, how?
No, it's like, because it's like 0, 1, and with how it's like an open question.
Yeah, exactly. Or this question, can you ask them to reiterate what you said? And this works better because instead of the message being, or the communication being one way, and the receiver just saying, yes, I understand, but they don't actually know, the receiver has to rethink what they've just heard, formulate it in their own words, send it back to the original sender, and then the sender can actually validate if the receiver is repeating it correctly. And if there is a difference, then the sender can reiterate and re-explain, and then eventually they'll both know and can be sure that they both have the same understanding. Finally, know your audience. Know if you're talking to technical and non-technical people. Be aware of jargon and acronyms, and according to the audience, use it wisely. And also make sure that you design slides to be visible for everyone. When I was here at the last meetup, I was sitting in the back row, and I noticed that I couldn't see, 50% of the screen. So I don't know if you've noticed, but maybe almost all my slides have content only in the top half. This is more about culture, especially in international teams. Be aware of certain idioms that you may just be used to, but in the literal sense, they don't make any sense. Like hit the road. I'm not gonna slap on the road. I'm leaving. So yeah, just be aware. There's a bunch of examples. Yeah, just be aware and try to avoid them. In summary, again, overshare, prefer more context over too little. Beware of ambiguities, prefer being overly specific. Again, just say more, give people more chances to understand. Know your audience. I know we don't like Elon Musk, but acronyms seriously suck. Also provide positive feedback and positive reinforcements rather than just, this is about code reviews, rather than just telling people what they did wrong. And finally, good communication helps your career, maybe your bank account, and it's general good advice for life and happiness. Thank you. If you want to connect to me or with me,
Do connect.
do connect.